Iro Dha इंद्रिया राय त्यागी ईश्वर हे नर वर त्यागी ईश्वर हे नर वर देहोपदे अनुराय निर्भय गत संचय वीर ईशय मानस वाय निष्कारण भगत शरण निष्कारण भगत शरण त्याजे जाति कुल माय संपद तव श्रीपद भव पुष्पद वारे यहाय प्रेमार्पण समदर्शन प्रेमार्पण समदर्शन जग जन दुख जाय संपद तव श्रीपद पदवारे यथाय प्रेमार्पण समदर्शन प्रेमार्पण समदर्शन जग जन दुख जाय नमो नमो प्रभुवाक्यमनादित नमो नमो प्रभुवाक्यमनादित मनोवचनैकाधा प्रभु मनोवचनैकाधा प्रभु ज्योतिरज्योति उज्ज्वलरुधिकं ज्योतिरज्योति उज्ज्वलरुधिकं तुमितमभञ्जनहार प्रभु तुमितमभञ्जनहार नमो नमो प्रभुवाक्यमनादित नमो नमो प्रभुवाक्यमनादित मनोवचनैकाधार प्रभु मनोवचनैकाधार गायिते छंद भगतवृंद आरती तोमार गायिते छंद भगतवृंद आरती तोमार जय जय आरती तोमार हर हर आरती तोमार शिव शिव आरती तोमार खंडन त्वमचलो गुणजीत गुणेढ्या नटं दिवं सकरुणं तव पाद पद्मं मोहं कशं बहुकृतं न भजेयतोऽहं तस्मात् त्वमेव शरणं मम दीनबन्धो भक्तिर्भगश्च भजनं भवभेद कारे गच्छन्तलं सुविपुलं गमनाय तत्त्वं वक्रोद्धृतोऽपि हृदमे न च भान्ति किञ्चित् तस्मात् त्वमेव शरणं मम दीनबन्धो तेजस्तरन्ति तरसा त्वयि तृप्त तृष्णा राज्ञे कृते घृतपथे त्वयि राम कृष्णे मर्त्यामृतं तव पदं मरणोन्मिनाशं तस्मात् त्वमेव शरणं मम दीनबन्धो कृत्यं करोति कलुषं कुहकान्तकारे स्नान्तं शिवं सुविमलं तव नाम नाथ यस्मादहं त्वशरणो जगदेकगम्य तस्मात् त्वमेव शरणं मम दीनबन्धो ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्म स्वरूपिणे अवतार वरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। ॐ नमः श्री भगवते रामकृष्णाय नमो नमः। ॐ नमः श्री भगवते रामकृष्णाय नमो नमः। ॐ नमः श्री भगवते रामकृष्णाय नमो नमः। सर्वमङ्गल माङ्गल्ये शिवे सर्वार्थसाधिके शरण्ये त्र्यम्बके गौरी नारायणी नमोस्तुते। सृष्टिस्थिति विनाशानां शक्ति भूते सनातनी गुणाश्रये गुणमये नारायणी नमोस्तुते। शरणागत दीनार्त परित्राण परायणे सर्वस्यार्थे हरे देवी नारायणी नमोस्तुते। जय नारायणी नमोस्तुते। जय नारायणी नमोस्तुते। जय नारायणी नमोस्तुते। जय नारायणी जय महामाई की जय। जय भगवान श्री रामकृष्ण देव की जय। जय स्वामी जी महाराज जी की जय।
Hello, check. Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchet Sukhaswarupaya Swami Netapaharine. Okay, so before we start the next paragraph in this lecture of Vivekananda, Maya and Freedom, I'd like to address a point that was raised in the YouTube questions last time, and somehow the question signifies a certain misunderstanding of the basic point of these three lectures. So let me stress this one more time before we proceed. So the question specifically asked, does that mean that external satisfaction and internal satisfaction are both Maya? See, the point of this whole series of lectures is not to say this or that particular psychological state is what Maya is about. Or if it does, it's pointing to a certain existential general fact, which is what? It is the conflation or confusion of opposites that forms the fundamental premise of our universal human experience. Yeah? So for instance, I said this thing about internal versus the external. This is a pair of opposites. But in any experience, can we really separate out the internal from the external? The lack of ability to do this is exactly what gives rise to this confusion between the internal aspect of the experience and the external aspect of the experience. This is one aspect of it, this confusion between the internal and the external. See, it doesn't really matter what you call it. You can call it confusion, you call it Maya, for that matter, you call it a chair, table, car, sky, it doesn't really matter. We don't call it a chair, table, car, sky, dog, cat, etc., etc. Basically because that will create further confusion and it's not going to use the precise technical term that has been used in books for so many years. So in order to prevent further propagation of confusion, we use this specific term Maya. It's a technical term which points at something rather specific in the universal aspect of the human experience. It does not belong to some philosophy or some religion. It's something that is fundamental to our human experience. This confusion between antipodes. Last time, how is it reflected in our experience? That is being elaborated upon in this particular lecture. And here it was basically said that we seek satisfaction through the objects of our senses, and then repeatedly we go on doing this in the hope that we find satisfaction, and finally we see that we do not. And he ends with this kind of ironic statement saying that we return again and again with freshened energy, thus basically to try to derive satisfaction, joy from sense objects. Thus we go on till crippled and cheated, we die. And this is Maya. So what is he pointing out again? He's pointing his finger to this fundamental, ironic / tragic aspect of human existence, which is born of lack of clarity of understanding. This lack of clarity of understanding or confusion of opposite pairs. In Shankara's commentary of the Brahma Sutra, the introduction, that's called the Adhyasa Bhashya. This is called Adhyasa. Adhi, as, gai. That means imposing the qualities of one on the other. Ahamesham mama ete iti naisargikoyam loka vyavahara. That's the statement there. Anyway, it doesn't matter. This individual aspect, it's called adhyasa. And the fact that it is universal in our human condition is what is referred to as Maya. Okay? That's all there is. So it doesn't make sense to say, does both internal and external satisfaction, are these Maya? No, that's not the point. That's not what this concept is about. Okay? So this is to clarify some questions that had come up on the basis of the last time's discussion. And so what he is doing here is he is taking various aspects of our human experience, various aspects of our life, taking each of these aspects and making this conflation, making this confusion between opposite pairs palpable and transparent. It's exposing the disease, so to speak, diagnosing it. And then will come the medicines. But if we don't understand what's wrong, what really is so sort of tragic about the human existence, what is the root of all our miseries, suffering, how are we going to address it? That's the problem. That's exactly what is being done here. It's diagnosing the problem. The way we are accustomed to think in various walks of our life is being exposed here. So the previous thing was about trying to seek satisfaction through sense objects. That was the end of last time's discussion. Now we come to another aspect of the human experience, namely our intellectual pursuits. Yeah. So I'll read out this paragraph and then try to understand how in this particular aspect of our experience as well, there is a presence of these two contradictory features which confuse us and basically provide our day-to-day experience with a lack of clarity. And once we have understood that the problem is lack of clarity, the solution will be seeking of clarity. This lack of clarity in the individual thing, it has various names. We give various labels depending on what aspect we want to emphasize. So, in one form that is called adhyasa, in another form it is called moha. Yeah? So, moha is what Shankara defines as a viveka, lack of analysis, lack of discrimination, lack of viveka. It's basically what is therefore required to gain that back, the opposite. So what is the opposite of aviveka? It will be not of aviveka, which means viveka, clarity, analysis. Analyzing our experience to try this universal human experience, analyzing it with the sole intent of gaining clarity. Okay? So here we come to the intellectual experience. And let's read this. So with our intellect, in our desire to solve the mysteries of the universe, we cannot stop our questioning. We feel we must know and cannot believe that no knowledge is to be gained. A few steps, and there arises the wall of beginningless and endless time which we cannot surmount. A few steps, and there appears a wall of boundless space which cannot be surmounted. And the whole is irrevocably bound in by the walls of cause and effect. We cannot go beyond them. This is one aspect, the limitation. And then he gives the opposite. Yet we struggle and still have to struggle. And this is Maya. Again, this is another aspect, universal aspect of our human experience. As I have said, see, the one thing that one really needs to do in order to understand this As I've said, there are really two of these analytical thoughts in the traditional thought of yore. One is, it is there in various other places, but this specific emphasis on analysis, it is there in two places very prominently. One is in the analysis that underlies Advaita Vedanta, which is what we are discussing here. On the other, in the Buddhist Madhyamaka philosophy. These two are essentially, I mean, they're very similar. I mean, there's certain concepts are, I mean, what one of our good friend Sarvapriyananda, whose talks you might have heard, a very fine speaker, he's fond of saying that these are mirror images of each other. Yeah. So it's the two philosophies are very similar. The procedure, the actual doing of it, the actual practice of either Advaita Vedanta or Madhyamaka Buddhism, it boils down to cultivating this sharp tool of analytical intellect which will cut away the dross and gain clarity. Why? Because we are accustomed to thinking in this confused way without questioning. Yeah? Without asking questions with the aim of arriving at something true that is hidden. This questioning faculty is there as part and parcel of our human experience as well. So this is not some intellectual abstraction that we are talking about. It involves actual doing, actual practice. What practice? What is the practice? The practice is precisely the cultivation of this analytical bent of mind, this scientific temper, so to speak. Yeah? We want to take our day-to-day existence as a starting point, just as a scientist in a laboratory takes a sample, takes a bunch of experiments and extracts from it raw data. Here, the raw data is our subjective experience in as general a form as possible. Not something that is special to me and not something that is special to you. This is the point of a scientific inquiry, which is why these two methods of inquiry necessarily have to cut through these silly labels which consist of which family you were born into, which society you were born into, and which organized religion you were born into. These are kindergartens. That's not what this pursuit is about. It's a serious inquiry, and therefore it has to take human experience at its most universal as a starting point. And that's why what he is talking about here is not something that is specific to Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, Jainism, Judaism, nothing of the sort. He's taking out something that is common in whether it's theistic, atheistic, agnostic. I would go so far as that. It doesn't matter whether you're a believer in God, whether you're an atheist, whether you're an agnostic. Nothing really matters. We as human beings, this is a certain common sense fact. We as human beings, we look at our experience just as a scientist looks at the sample on a laboratory table. Just see it and try to look at it in this detached way. Can we generalize it? Can we generalize these aspects of our experience in its most general form and then identify what it is we are seeking? And here, the point of Jnana Yoga is to seek clarity. Point of Jnana Yoga, we have all these esoteric terms, illumination, etc., etc., and realization, and we don't bother to ask what exactly those things mean. And so they create in our heads this mystical cloud, which is the very antithesis of what we are actually seeking. What we are actually seeking is clarity. Yeah. One of our presidents, so once I'll just narrate this to you because it sort of is quintessential to what's being discussed here. At a point of time, at that time, he was not yet president at that time. So he had, in one little sentence, he had summarized the aspect of service work that we have in this organization. And he said, you see, I'll tell you the formula of how to do work on a day-to-day basis in this organization. And I'll say what he said, and then I'll say what more he had. So he said, take everything seriously, take nothing seriously. So did you understand? So he said, so of course, I mean, first thing, it sounds completely contradictory, right? The first sentence is, take everything seriously, stop, then take nothing seriously. And then he says, you see, these Zen Buddhists have this thing about koans, yeah, K-O-A-N-S. So these are supposed to be little formulae which somehow stun our usual rational intellect, which is accustomed to running in certain grooves. And then what it is actually suggesting is it's giving you a pair of suggestions which seem to be contradictory. What it is asking you to actually do, not just some kind of understanding, not some kind of superficial intellectual understanding so that we can play a game of chess with all these ideas and concepts, so that we can write tomes of philosophical books on them. What are we supposed to do with it? We are supposed to understand Vivekananda. So I'll say one thing, that actually Vivekananda himself, his formula for work, yeah, in our day-to-day basis, on a day-to-day basis, has been something very similar, but in a different language, in a completely different language. And he says, the mind must develop the capacity for full attachment and full detachment. When doing the work, do it with full concentration, full focus. Then when you leave it completely. This first thing, complete focus, is what he's calling attachment. Attachment to the work at hand, done with full dedication and concentration. Focus, what we call professionalism. And then when you leave it completely. So the first one, if you translate, then the Zen koan basically says the same thing. Well, I don't know whether it's a Zen koan, it's something our present President had told me once long back. It's basically take everything seriously, which means while doing the work, take every detail seriously. And then take nothing seriously. When you leave it, you leave it. Yeah? This whole business of doing detached work, etc., 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 volumes have been written on it. Large parts of the Bhagavad Gita are concentrated on it. Tilak's entire commentary on the Bhagavad Gita is gone. All of it is summarized in that one little sentence. Yeah? Take everything seriously, take nothing seriously. Or the mind should develop attachment, full concentration, full detachment. Or, again, if you want to put it in the Buddhist language, see, these things are not specific to any particular organized religion. It's something that's a common human property. And therefore, one should not attribute it to, okay, so and so. See, basically, nobody says that gravity is something that is English in origin, right? So, Isaac Newton was English. Yeah, so what? Does gravity go away because he was English? I mean, if he was not English and he was French, would gravity be any different? So that's how ridiculous it is to attribute any such thing to some particular nation. National borders keep changing. They're highly temporal. But scientific facts, whether they be about the external science of gravity or whether they be about the scientific facts that guide our broad mental tendencies, these are something universal. Yeah? And that's the temper that one is supposed to cultivate through this, in and through this. So here, So what I was about to say, and I went off on this diatribe about universality. So the Buddhists call the same thing mindfulness. It's doing work with full concentration and leaving it. Which means what? When I'm not doing the work, I mean, they say it in this very funny way, which sounds obvious. When I'm not doing the work, I am not doing the work. When I'm doing the work, I am doing the work. That's all it means. Really, it's something as simple as that. When we say I am doing this, are we really? I mean, this is the point that where we are supposed to actually do this practice. When I am doing something, am I actually doing it? Or is half my mind wandering around thinking of what I'm going to have for dinner, what so-and-so said to me in the morning, what made me feel angry? Is our mind in the present? Or is most of it dissipated in the past and in the future? Yeah? There's this, several of you might have heard of this astronomer, poet, mathematician called Omar Khayyam. Yeah? So Omar Khayyam had this little collection of poems called the Rubaiyat. So in it, there is this little couplet, 4 lines. Oh my beloved, fill the cup that clears, today of past regrets and future fears. It was translated into English by somebody called Fitzgerald, Edward Fitzgerald. Not Scott Fitzgerald, somebody else, Edward Fitzgerald. Past regrets and future fears. See, he's a poet. Poet, philosopher, mathematician, astronomer. This is about maybe 1100 AD or so and so. Yeah. So these are the things that capture our mind in our day-to-day existence. Past regrets and future fears. Yeah? Mind dissipated in the past and the future at the cost of the present. And all that this is saying is essentially all you need for clarity is to keep the mind at the present, in the present moment. In the present moment is not some, I don't write present moment in block letters and focus on it. That's not what it means. We all know what this present moment are in some instinctive sense. Develop clarity about it. That's all that is being suggested. It's really the simplest possible practice there could be. Because this present moment is there with us all the time, except that we fail to notice it. We fail to notice, fail to apply our full attention to it. Why? Why? And here is something that is being said. See, when we try to understand these things discursively, through the discursive intellect, what are we really doing? And that's why he has said this. We immediately perceive if you try to look outside, instead of trying to find the answer in one's own consciousness, subjectively, through an analysis of the subject, instead if we take our objective experience as something that is true and try to find the truth there, what does it lead us to? It leads us to this fundamental framework through which we understand objective reality. What is that? What are those parameters? What are those paradigms? Space, time, and causation. Whenever we try to grasp objective reality, if there is motion, if there is something changing, that change is with respect to this idea in our heads called time. If we want to look at the position of 2 objects, could be the bodies of 2 human beings, could be a chair, could be a table, could be a fan, then their relative position with respect to each other is with respect to this underlying idea of space that is there in our heads. And one configuration in space preceding another configuration in space, we concoct a relation between them and give it a name, causation. So it is our minds trying to make sense of the objective reality that gives rise to these abstract concepts of space, time, and causation. In another lecture, therefore, Vivekananda has actually said, what is Maya? You might as well take it to be this space-time causation, that framework through which you understand all objective phenomena. And so, when our intellect, when we try to understand anything objectively through our intellect, the final obstacle turns out to be this space, time, and causation. And yet we try to get beyond it without every time coming up against this wall, so to speak. But still we struggle to go beyond that. And what he is saying here, this particular contradictory aspect, every time we try to seek truth, we end up with space-time causation as a framework, as an impenetrable framework, and yet we want to go beyond it to greater clarity. In other words, what we popularly is described as, our minds and intellects understand, but our hearts don't. So our wish is to go beyond that. We don't. We aren't able to. And this contradiction, again underlying human experience in its most universal form, is an instance of what is encapsulated by this word Maya. Okay? That's the point of this particular paragraph. Yeah? Okay. So that's fine. I mean, I'll just try to go on a slight aside here. We have just about 5 minutes left. Is there something in our physical constitution? You see, biological science has made tremendous advances in the 20th century. Human longevity has increased enormously. Enormously from the beginning, from early 20th century to today. Human longevity has probably increased by maybe 15, maybe more years. Yeah? I am not very sure what it was, but certainly at least 15 years, possibly 20 years. And they say that the 20th century was probably the century of the physical sciences, the 21st century is the century of the life sciences. What is happening is that human beings as a whole are turning their minds somehow inwards into the psychophysical organism and trying to penetrate into it, trying to understand it. Yeah? So from the physical outside, we are turning to this biological entity which we are trying to understand today. Fine. So can we try to understand, at least in terms of what biology tells us today, where this contradiction is rooted? And I'm suggesting an answer, and I just hope that people will come up with their own answers to this conundrum. This is not supposed to be taken as anything sacrosanct. I mean, if anything, all that we should do is try to analyze and find answers which are good for ourselves, which satisfy our own desire for knowledge. Here's the point. Biological evolution is essentially based on what? Sustenance and propagation of a particular species. A genetic constitution tries to propagate itself. That's all there is to it. The human being, on the other hand, has this strange object which has been thrown up by evolution through various instances of combination, recombination, largely chance, perhaps some part of it determined. but a mixture of various things called the human brain. This human brain has this one front part, it's called the prefrontal cortex, which occupies a substantial part of our brain weight and contributes and is the master of most of our what we call higher human experience. Call it aesthetics, call it analysis and discrimination or analytical knowledge, or call it altruism, a capacity to feel for other human beings. These three things that I've said right now, aesthetics, knowledge and altruism, it's way back. I mean, different schools of philosophy gave them different names. Yeah, Plato called it the true, the good, the beautiful. Yeah, the pursuit of truth gave rise to science. The pursuit of beauty gave rise to art. The pursuit of goodness gave rise to social work. In Sanskrit, the same thing in slightly different language, some slightly different connotation is called Sat Chit Ananda. It's basically pointing a finger at something rather universal in the higher aspect of the human experience. But this has somehow been thrown up. Wherein lies the contradiction, therefore? It's essentially this, that the brain, the forebrain, is trying to dictate certain kinds of activities. It is a product of evolution, but is somehow supposed to, it's basically trying to say that, look, no, I am going to take my destiny, my creative evolution in my own hands. I am not going to be dictated to by the biological evolution. And so, there is this fact, this conflict is biologically hardwired into us. There is this higher brain which perceives these higher values of truth, beauty, goodness. Satchidananda, whatever language you want to call it, that's secondary, not important. On the other hand, there is the leftover of biological evolution, which is what guides us as biological psychophysical beings, as people with bodies and minds which move around. And these two, part of our system, are in conflict with each other. This biological conflict between the leftover of biological evolution and the evolution of the human brain, which is social. I mean, it's human brain being, see, the point is, biological evolution never designed us to make sense of the universe around us. A dog or a cat or a mosquito is perfectly happy eating, drinking and making sure that its species propagates. It's largely at the human level, at least to the best of our understanding, that we have this craziness which basically prompts us to seek something that is beautiful. The sunset, a mountain range clad in snow. Or seek the truth behind this nature. What is it in us that makes us see nature this way? Different aspects, different fields of science crop up from these various aspects of our inquiry. This is not what evolution has designed us to do. On the other hand, it may be designed the brain for some purpose, but then the brain has hijacked its own evolution. I mean, if you might have heard that there are these various eras, and this is the the anthropocentric era, where Anthropocene, I think is what it's called. It's essentially the era, the geological era in which we live is heavily influenced, for better or worse, by this 8 billion members of this weird species called Homo sapiens inhabiting this planet. And so, it's basically up to us to take care of this world we live in. Essentially, it's only in this higher brain which we have used to exploit the resources of the world for our biological sustenance that needs to be again given back to see this world from this larger perspective. That will basically take these aspects, these higher aspects of our being, to their culmination, to their fruition. It does not exist without the biological basis as far as the scientific evidence is concerned. Fair enough. But so what? It is in this human existence itself that we can exercise these higher powers and bring satisfaction, joy to ourselves, those around us, this world in general. We'll take up the next aspect of these things in the next class. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.